Why are we here? What is our purpose? What is His will? How do we know what's true and what's real? We may not know where life's road will lead, but it doesn't matter as long as we believe that God is the answer. God is the answer. God is the answer to whatever the question may be. What's going on in this world today? Where do we fit? What can we do to make a difference? What can we say? Where do we go? This way or that way? If we all pray and truly believe and love one another, we can let the world see that God is the answer. God is the answer. God is the answer to whatever the question may be. We may not know where life's road will lead, but it doesn't matter long as we believe that God is the answer. God is the answer. God is the answer to whatever the question may be.
Good morning and welcome to Unity of the Blue Ridge Winter Wonderland. Glad to have you joining us live stream this morning. I'm here with Richard Shulman, and we have Tia and Donna with us on camera and on sound. But most importantly, we have you joining us right now. We want to welcome you. You know, I've heard from many of you this week, and it's been quite the interesting week in our nation. All sorts of feelings, a lot of things going on. And, you know, there's a quote by Rumi that says, it is love that exists between you and anything. And I really thought about this week, and it lines up with a winter series that we're going to be kicking off today, a 10-week series that is titled The Presence of Love, 10 Keys. I'm going to be pulling from many different spiritual traditions, wisdom traditions, and then The Laws of Love by Paul Ferrini, looking at 10 different principles or aspects that help us really understand what is this love that we are. And today, the first one that we're going to look at is oneness. What does that really mean? And I think our world is calling for this, our nation is calling for this, for us to really understand what this means and live into it. And so as we prepare for that, I invite you to join me in an opening prayer. As we turn our awareness within this morning, we give thanks for the truth that love is that which can be between us and anything else, that love stands between us and anything else, that unconditional love means there are no conditions where love cannot be present, and that if God is love and we are love, then it's far more than a sentiment or an emotion. We open to this exploration, and today through the lens of oneness, And so we give thanks for this opportunity to be here. It's important that we can still gather together in spirit and in virtuality. And so for this time together, we are truly grateful. Thank you, God. And so it is. We're going to go back in time to one of my favorite songs. It's songs that there's only one power, many names, but one power. Enjoy.
I believe that all people are created with sacred worth. We are one in spirit, created to love others as we love our God and ourself.
We are love in action, God in expression.
As an expression of God, we stand for peace in all presence of conflict.
We stand for love in the presence of hatred.
We stand for forgiveness in the presence of injury.
We stand for faith and courage in the presence of despair.
In unity, we honor the many names for God, the many paths to God, and the many ways to worship God.
For there is only one power and presence of God, and that God is love.
God loves each one of us equally.
And God is within each one of us. We are the light of the world.
And the world needs our good love light to shine.
One power, one power. There's one power, invisible, and you see it everywhere and every day. One power, indescribable, and you speak it with every word you want to say. Mysterious until you know the truth. As simple as the love inside of you. Call it God, call it Spirit, call it Jesus, call it Lord, call it Buddha, Baha'u'llah, angel wings or heaven's door. But whatever name you give it, it's all one power, can't you see? It's the power of the love in you and me. One power, one power, ooh, one power. We speak so many languages and different clothing, different colors, different names. But different is only dangerous when we forget that in the heart we're all the same. And we remember once we close our eyes to see that such distances were never meant to be. Call it God, call it Spirit, call it Jesus, call it Lord, call it Buddha, Baha'u'llah, angel's wings or heaven's door. It's Muhammad, it's your mind, it's your soul, or it's your sign. It's the universe, it's music, Mother Earth or Father Time. But whatever name you give it, it's all one power, can't you see? It's the power of the love. It's in you and me. One power, ooh, one power, one power. One power, one power, one power.
All right. I love that song. And again, I want to thank you for being here as we begin a 10-week winter series based on the principles of, or based on the presence of love, 10 keys. And the first key or principle that we're going to look at today is the principle of oneness. You know, at my last spiritual community, Unity of South Sound, out in the outside of Seattle, Washington, we had a young teenager who ran our sound, and his mom loved it that he was in the sound booth because it meant that he had to be in church every Sunday and hear what was being said. But he was this really neat guy and really sharp and always listening, and he would oftentimes offer me jokes and things because he knew I liked to share funny things. And so I came in one Sunday and he said, "Hey, I've got one for you." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "What did the Buddhist monk say to the hot dog vendor?" And I said, "I have no idea." And he said, "Make me one with everything." Well, it was very funny. And that statement, "Make me one with everything," or "May I know my oneness with everything," is a prayer that has been prayed for centuries. To know our oneness, you know, for thousands of years, there have been enlightened teachers and mystics and philosophers and sages who have shared the same essential message. It may have been spoken slightly differently, but the message is, we are one. That the absolute principle of oneness, meaning that the one constitutes all that is, the total reality. The way, when I first started entertaining this idea, I thought about it as, I saw this image one time when I was meditating of like cookie dough, that if all there was in the world was cookie dough, then everything that was created would be made from that cookie dough. Well, it's kind of a funny analogy, but in a sense, it helps us get it, that there is one that constitutes the totality of all existence. But we could also say that the one is not completely absorbed in the existence, that it somehow sustains an even bigger than. And so religion, philosophy has spoken about this, but now quantum physics does the same thing, provides the same message. It says there's a unified field which underlies and animates and connects all creation. The astrophysicist Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson was asked by a reader of Time magazine a really sharp question. The reader asked Dr. Tyson, "What is the most astounding fact you can share with us about the universe?" And he responded, he said, "We are in the universe, but the universe is also in us. We share our atoms with the stars. We are interconnected by both the origin of our consciousness and the atoms that create our physical being. That all forms of expression are a manifestation of the one." In Unity, we begin by saying there's one power and one presence in the universe and in our life, and we call it God. It's known by many names, truly defined by none. But what does it really mean beyond the concept for us to live in the awareness of our oneness? Many different scriptures and traditions, as I've said, echo this in different ways. In the New Testament, from Acts chapter 17, it says, "For in God we live and move and have our very being." The Old Testament in Genesis, that we're made in the likeness and image of Yahweh. And it's not just that we're made by God. The scripture differentiates, not made by, but made of and in the likeness and image of God. Jesus also spoke of this when he taught the disciples to pray. he began the prayer by saying, "Our Father." That "our" is representative of we are all an expression of the one creative source, and that there is no cause outside, no being that causes itself. There is this one cause. And Jesus went on to say, "I and my Father are one." And many religious teachings have tried to, or really just Christianity, has pointed to that to say he meant only him, that he and the Father are one, but the rest of you are not. But that's not what Jesus said. As a matter of fact, in one of his last prayers when he said, "I and my Father are one," but his prayer was that we may all be and know our oneness with the Father as he is one with the Father. And so when he was speaking about being one, what he was talking about is that I know the wholeness of God is your wholeness. I believe that he had such a knowingness that it entrained people to that level of awareness that he knew that the life of that individual was the life of God. That's why it didn't matter to him if it was a Samaritan or a Jewish brother or sister. It didn't matter to him if it was a priest or if it was a leper, because he looked at that individual and knew that that individual was an expression of the one life. And so I truly believe that any teaching or any philosophy that teaches us that we're separate from our source or separate from God, I think that's a damaging teaching and a false teaching. I have said many times that we can never be disconnected from our source. However, we can think ourselves apart. Joseph Kaufman said, "You are just as connected to the universe as a finger is to the hand, as a branch is to a tree. The entire cosmos is expressing itself through your being." The writer of Ephesians said it this way, "There is one body and one spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all." Well, the starting point, the true starting point, I believe, of spiritual growth, of awakening, of self-mastery, self with a capital S, we would say. The true starting point is oneness. If we are made in the likeness and image, and if the greatest teaching, the summation of all the laws, is to love our God and to love our neighbor as ourself, that love speaks of the oneness that we all share through creation. Paul Ferrini, who writes the book, The 10 Laws of Love, said, "The essence of you lives in God, but you must claim your oneness with the creative essence within." Again, the many parables and teachings that Jesus offered, for example, the story of the prodigal son, he would tell stories seeking to make the point that you may go to a foreign land, you may cut yourself off, but you are never truly cut off. You are never a servant. You're always family. You're always heir. He would tell stories like that to help people understand their relationship with the Creator and with one another. And so the question then for us is, how do we take responsibility for living into the oneness that is the truth of our being? How do we remember that we are all part of a larger being? You know, I mentioned when we opened just the challenges that our nation has gone through this week, and like many of you, I watched the news or social media in just sadness and dismay. And yet I can also tell you that I am in relationship with that kind of information and things happening in a different way than I was years ago. Because I'll tell a story in a minute, and I think it'll make the point, so I'll just come back to that. But just to know that I believe there's a global cry going on right now. You know, we're either being, A Course in Miracles basically says, we're either being an expression of love or a cry for love. We're either living from the awareness of our oneness, or we're crying because we feel separate and broken and disenfranchised. And that's not to say that injustice doesn't happen, because it does. It's not to say that there aren't things that need to be corrected, because there are. It's not to say that we don't need leaders we need leaders who have a love, who have a power for love more than a love for power. We need those things in our world. This is not an either or, it's a both and. But when you live in the awareness and you know the truth of your oneness and the truth of other people, you can respond in a way that more quickly allows you to be part of the healing, rather than constantly having to tend to your own healing, if that makes sense. So I want to look at three aspects, three things that we can consider when we're thinking about living in the awareness of our oneness. The first one is, what am I? The question that we all ask at different points in our life, what am I? And placing this in the context of living in the awareness of the oneness with your source and all creation, what am I? As I said earlier, you can never be disconnected from your source, but you can think you are. You can think yourself apart, and what we think makes a world of difference. In my first ministry, Unity Church of Lawrence in Lawrence, Kansas, a college town, a wonderful community of people, the church, one Sunday I noticed someone new. It was a young person, a young woman, and she introduced herself afterwards going out. She was a student at the university, an international exchange student, and as part of her world religions class, she needed to go to different churches, mosques, synagogues, and just experience different things. So I was, glad to have her. We saw a lot of people that came in through the university. But she came back, and she came back, and she came back several times. And one Sunday, she asked if she could meet with me privately, and I said, sure, I'd be happy to. So we set up a time for her to meet. And when she came in, she asked if she could tell me a little bit of her story. Her name was Eunice Lee. Now, she eventually shared the story with the whole church, so I have her permission to share. But Eunice was born and grew up in Korea. When she was born, her parents were very young, newlywed parents, had this little baby girl, and then the parents separated. Now in Korea, in that culture, if you were a young person and you had been married, it was like a stain on your reputation. And so she was evidence of something gone wrong. And so what happened is right after she was born, the parents had separated, and so she first went with the mother, but then the mother's family didn't want her because they felt like the young woman would never be able to get married, so they literally took Eunice and left her on the doorstep of the father's family. Well, after a short period of time, the father's family didn't want her, so for a number of years, this child literally went back and forth, doorstep to doorstep, until one day at the age of 4 or 5 years old, one of the families dropped her at an orphanage and left her. And she said when the people from the orphanage came out and started asking her where was her family, and she told them who her family was and they were going to take her, she said, no, please don't. Can I just stay here? Now, can you imagine that, a 4 or 5 year old child wanting to stay at the orphanage? And she did. That's where she stayed, and that's where she grew up. And the way that we would say it probably is she pulled herself up by her bootstraps. She was academically gifted, very smart, and so here she was in Lawrence, Kansas, an international exchange student in a Unity church. And after she told me a little bit of her story, she looked right at me and she said, now the reason I'm here, she said, if I am understanding what you're saying on Sunday, you're saying that I have a soul. And this big lump just welled up in my throat. I wanted to cry. I thought, it never crossed my mind that someone may not know that they had a soul. And I said, yes, I absolutely believe you have a soul. And she said, so that means I have a spirit. And that means that I'm connected to God. And we had this kind of conversation, and it was the joy in her eyes and the possibility, the light bulb that was going off. And then she was thinking about that, and she said, and I was just quiet waiting for her, and she said, well, if all of that is true, she said, that changes everything, because that means there are no bad people in the world. There are just people in bad places. And chills ran all over me when she said that. I'd never heard it put that way. There are no bad people in the world, just people in bad places. She and a friend of hers started attending regularly and wanted materials so that when they went back to Korea, they could study these concepts and these ideas. And I have never, ever forgotten Eunice Lee. And how she taught me, that when we ask, what am I? And am I living in the awareness of my source connection? One of the greatest things to realize is that there are no bad people, but there are a lot of people living in bad places and therefore acting out in bad ways. Now, you can say that's a play on words, but I will tell you how you hold that in your consciousness and how you hold them changes everything. Ernest Holmes said, everything that lives proclaims the glory of God. Every person who exists manifests as the life of God. There's one spirit in which we live, one mind in which we think, one body in which we are a part of, one light that lighteth the many pathways. And so what does it mean to you to know that you are one with the source? You see, to know that we are one with the source, just like Eunice discovered, it means if you are one with the one, then you are worthy, you are enough, you are connected, you are loved, you are imbued with purpose. That if you really grasp the concept that you are one with the one, all of those things are a part of who you are. And so, what does it mean to you to know that you are one? What are you? The second one is, who am I? What am I? I am one with the one, a chip off the original source block, always connected. And then, who am I? Dr. Andrew Wild, many of you probably recognize his name. He is a doctor with alternative medicine. He had an associate, Dr. Louis Mel Madrona, who was working with him for a while and decided he was in working with Dr. Wheel and working with some of his own patients. Dr. Mel Madrona noticed that there were a certain number of people that were spontaneously healed or were going into remission. And so he wanted to study those individuals who were claiming a healing or had gone into some sort of remission. He wanted to see what, if anything, were there a common denominator. Well, he wrote a book titled Coyote Medicine based on what he found, because he did find a common denominator. He said that in almost all cases of people with spontaneous remission or miraculous healing was what he called a change of story. That along with their physical healing, they had some sort of shift in awareness, a oneness experience, an experience that shifted who they were and their story, that they all had a change in story that eventually took place also. And that so that the who I am is, am I stuck in a story? Am I identified as just my story? Or am I thy spirit, the one spirit expressing? Again, that's a huge difference in how we come to know ourselves. Now, I am not saying that if everyone that changes your story will have an instantaneous healing or a remission, because I personally believe that healing takes place on many different levels. And when we're looking for what we may call a cure, that may not be what the soul has. That's just my personal belief. You have to know what you believe. But the point here is, are we identified with a story, or do we know ourselves as an expression of spirit? Rumi said, I searched for God and found myself. I searched for myself and found only God. On February 12th, 1950, Albert Einstein sat down to write a letter. It was going to be a difficult letter to write because he was responding. He was writing back, as was his custom. When he received mail, he would respond. And he was writing back to a devastated and bereaved father from New York who had just lost his 11-year-old son to polio. And in this man's grief and just confusion, for whatever reason, he decided to reach out to the world-famous Albert Einstein. And so Einstein gave considerable thought to that letter. And then he wrote, and this is an excerpt from a now famous letter that was later published in the New York Times. Einstein said, a human being is part of the whole world, called by us the universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. The delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and affections for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circles of understanding and compassion, to embrace all living creatures in the whole of nature in its beauty. You see, who am I? Am I my story? Am I my circumstances? Or am I an expression of spirit? When we live in the awareness of our oneness, we come to know ourselves and to know all others as an expression of the Spirit, even when they don't act like it, even when they don't know it, even when they do evil things. And yes, people do evil things. People can absolutely do evil things and should be held accountable for those things. But what our responsibility is to never lose sight of who they are, because you cannot hold your brother or sister in the darkness and hold yourself in the light. And that's the whole point of oneness, of understanding that we have to sometimes just grapple with this. As Rumi said, the bridge between me and anything is love. And sometimes we fall off that bridge. Sometimes we have to find our way back to it. But it's a matter of holding people and things and systems accountable and yet not demonizing them, not holding them in the dark. And it's possible and it's liberating. So what am I? Who am I? And then the third one is, now am I? Richard, would you give me that song? Part of oneness, really taking it from a concept to an embodied, felt sense of reality, is bringing mindfulness to what we're doing now. You know, when you begin to meditate, when you begin to become mindful, you realize that you have thoughts, but you're not the thoughts. You are able to separate and notice that you have what is often called the silent witness. There's a dimension of you that can pay attention, this pure awareness. And when you connect with that, you connect with that field of oneness. Now I am. The Buddha said a group of people were sitting in a boat, and one took an axe and began to chop the floor. The others began to cry in horror and fear, "What are you doing?" And the man said, "What business is it of yours? I'm doing this to my part of the boat." The Native Americans say that we're all part of the great web of life. What we do to any part, we do to the web. You see, if we focus only on our individual needs, it's like trying to live as an isolated cell. But when we focus on the greater good, an enlarged sense of beingness, our connection to all creation, then you live the life of the whole, not just the isolated cell. And once you understand that everything is interconnected, it also opens you up. That's why we're going through 10 weeks of this, because it opens you up to divine synchronicity. It opens you up to intuition. It opens you up to love, to peace, to the things that many of us desire. Final story, Dr. Rachel Naomi Reman wrote a book titled Kitchen Table Wisdom. And I don't remember if this story is in that book or if I just read it somewhere else from her. But she told a story about a colleague of hers, a male doctor who was really good with his patients. And he had several patients that were literally homeless, street people. And there was one woman in particular, Dolores, who would come in every month, faithful for her appointment with the doctor. But Dolores also showed up at times when it wasn't her appointment. And she'd come into the waiting room for just a brief moment of time, and she'd kind of keep an eye on where his office was. And then she'd pick a moment, and she'd walk over to his office, and she would just step in. And she just waited a few minutes, and then she'd go out and leave. And after doing that for several weeks, one of the receptionist asked, was she okay? Did she need anything? And she said, no. I just need to put myself where I can remember my connection. Isn't that beautiful? Now am I? Am I putting myself where I can remember our connection or not? What am I? Who am I? Now am I? In this moment, in this place, I remember who I am, letting fear and worry fall away from me. I open my eyes to see there is only love. There is only love. Love that heals, love that sets us free. There is only love. So when I lose myself, when it seems I've lost my way, then I go inside and quiet my mind, and I hear my spirit gently say that there is only love. There is only love. Love that heals, love that sets us free. There is only love. As we turn our awareness within, there is one life, one source. Abba, Abba, creator of all, sustainer. Not one of us has given expression to our own life. We were given this life. Not one of us animates our being, but the one spirit that animates all creation animates our spirit. And just as the earth may grow a kernel of corn or an acorn into an oak tree, And one piece of earth may be in Africa, and another piece of earth may be in the Bahamas, and another piece of earth may be in Atlanta. But that earth will grow whatever is put into it, because that's what the earth does. It's one earth that grows the seeds that it is given. There is one life, one field of reality from which we all spring forth in our different places, in our different forms, and yet we come from the same source. And we can never be disconnected from this source. Our worthiness, our purpose, our capacity to be connected to the inner resources that we need are an inherent part of who we are as an expression of all that is. What am I? Who am I? Now am I? So when I lose myself, when it seems I've lost my way, then I go inside and I quiet my mind, and I can hear my spirit gently say, there is only love. There is only love. It's love that heals, love that sets us free. There is only love. There is only love. And you and I are that love. I want to thank you for being here today, for holding space, for finding your way to that bridge, that love is the bridge between you and anything. We are holding our community in prayer, our nation, our world in prayer. If you have a particular prayer request, send us an email, give us a call. We'll be glad to pray with you and to hold that in prayer. Reverend Christie, as you saw with the announcements, Reverend Christie is going to be facilitating a Wednesday night discussion where we're going to take these concepts deeper into discussion on Wednesday nights. I'm going to pop in some weeks, but the information is on our website, and we hope that you can join us there. So I want to thank you for being here, and I want to wish you a wonderful week again. We hold our world together in prayer, and we're going to send you off with another wonderful song. Blessings.
Life is easy when you're up on the mountain. You've got peace of mind like you've never known. But things change when you're down in the valley. Don't lose faith, for you're never alone. For the God on the mountain is still God in the valley. When things go wrong, God is the light, and the God of the good times is still God in the bad times. Oh, God of the day is still God in the night. We talk of faith, way up on the mountain. But talk comes so easy when life's at its best. Now it's down in the valley, trials and temptations. That's where your faith is really put to the test. For the God on the mountain is still God in the valley. When things go wrong, God is the light, and God of the good times is still God in the bad times. Oh, God of the day is still God in the night. For the God on the mountain is still God in the valley. When things go wrong, God is the light, and the God of the good times is still God in the bad times. Oh, God of the day is still God in the night. The God of the day is still God in the night.